Okay, good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for joining the annual Independent Office of Evaluation ARRI event. My name is Roxana Sami, and I will be moderating today's event. I wish to welcome our virtual participants, our IFAD Executive Board members who have joined us this afternoon, our colleagues from our sister agencies, and our very many IFAD colleagues who've joined via this webinar. First and foremost, I hope all of you are safe and you're in good health. This is indeed very tough times, and I trust all of you are doing well. We are looking forward to an interactive and candid exchange, and we have an exciting agenda for you all. I want to get some housekeeping out of the way before kicking us off. So during the panel discussion, participants can pose their questions using the Q&A option, which you will find on the bottom bar of your of the Zoom application. So you should see an option that says Q&A. You can just simply go in there and type your question. If you want to direct it to a specific panelist, you can type their name. And one other feature that this Q&A has, which is absolutely wonderful, and it will make my job easier, is that participants can actually vote for each other's questions. So if you find a question absolutely compelling, you can give it a thumbs up, and it just moves up the list. And so then afterwards, I can just go there and ask the questions that have been, that are more popular. You can also pose your questions via Twitter using the hashtag ARRI 2020. So that's hashtag ARRI 2020. And my IOE colleagues will be keeping an eye on the Twitter stream, and they will then share the question that you've asked via Twitter. Now, as far as the agenda is concerned, we will have a welcome address by Fabrizio Felloni, followed by the presentation of ARRI itself, the 2020 ARRI, and my colleague Hans-Siep will do that, and then we will have the panel discussion. During the ARRI 2020 presentation, Hans-Siep, one of the things that he will do is he will be sharing a series of recurring factors in project design and implementation, which are affecting performance. What we ask you to do is to cast your vote on which ones you think are the most important ones and need to be addressed as a matter of priority. This will be done in the polling section. So again, if you look on the bottom bar of your Zoom application, you'll see an option called polling. So you just need to go there and cast your vote. Now, Hans-Siep will talk about this during his presentation. So that's the housekeeping out of the way. So without further ado, allow me to invite Fabrizio Felloni, the Director ad interim of the Independent Office of Evaluation, to deliver his welcoming remarks. Fabrizio, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. State Minister of Agriculture from the government of Ethiopia, Dr. Kaba, Mr. Donald Brown, Associate Vice President from the Program Management Department of IFAD, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening for some of you, and a very, very warm welcome to this Learn event on the 2020 Annual Report on Results and Impact of IFAD Operations, ARRI. It is a great pleasure for us in the Independent Office of Evaluation to have you join us today to discuss the 18th edition of the report of the ARRI. So let me also thank my colleagues who have helped us prepare this document, notably Mr. Hans-Siep Khaira and Mr. Nantikesan Supramaniam, and also Mrs. Laura Morja, who has helped us in many phases of this evaluation, also helped us organize this event. The ARRI presents a synthesis of a performance of IFAD-supported operation and highlights systemic and cross-cutting issues, lessons, and challenges to enhance the development effectiveness of IFAD-funded operations. In presenting an overview of results and the impact of IFAD's operation, as well as recent trends based on evaluation completed by IOE, the ARRI is a key in ensuring accountability for results. And at the same time, the ARRI analyzes factors that contribute to performance, stronger or weaker, thus contributing to learning. Moreover, by identifying different performance patterns on different evaluation criteria, it helps prioritize the choice of future evaluation, as well as follow-up actions by management. The 2020 ARRI draws its findings from project-level evaluations that were completed between 2007 and 2018, as well as country strategy and program evaluations. The ARRI 2020 is more concise than in previous years and dedicates more attention to identifying factors that explain performance. The majority of projects completed in 2016-18, which are the most recent on which ARRI reports, have ratings in the so-called positive zones across the different criteria. So that's a positive finding. However, the ARRI also finds that the trends from 2013-2015 onwards shows a slight decline overall in performance, although there are variations and exceptions to this pattern. In particularly, ratings for government performance have declined more than for other criteria from 2013-15 until the most recent period. Note, by the way, that IOE assesses the performance of government with specific reference to IFAD operations. It does not assess government performance in broad terms in general, only referring to IFAD-funded operations. The role of government as IFAD partners, as an IFAD partner, is critical to the implementation success of IFAD-supported projects and programs. The performance of government also has strong bearing on the efficiency and sustainability of operations. And for this reason, the continuous decline in ratings of government performance is a matter of critical reflection. And hence the topic of the ARRI 2020 learning event focuses on government performance. In addition, let me anticipate that in 2021, our office will conduct an evaluation synthesis on government performance, given the importance of this criterion. Today's event provides us with an opportunity to bring together IFAD Executive Board members, management of IFAD, IFAD staff, colleagues from other agencies to discuss what we have learned from completed projects and how those lessons can contribute to raising the quality of IFAD's program of work. And we hope that through these lessons and through today's discussion, we may also generate concrete actions to further strengthen the performance results in the countries where IFAD operates. So I invite you to engage actively in today's event and to share your ideas openly. And I'm looking forward to a fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Thank you, Fabrizio, for the warm welcome and inviting us to have a fruitful conversation. Now, if I may now ask Hansip to please present the highlights of the 2020 ARRI. Hansip's presentation really sets the context and gives a background for the conversation that will follow. So over to you, Hansip.
Right. Thank you very much, Roxy. So let me start quickly by sharing the findings that were published in the IOE's annual report on results and impact, which is called the ARRI. So the ARRI looked at the recent performance of IFAD-supported projects, and by this I mean the projects that were completed between 2016 and 2018. And in terms of percentage of projects with moderately satisfactory and above ratings. And in the graphic, you see these in blue on the right-hand side. So the ARRI found that the three criteria that have performed better than others, and these are environment and natural resource management, relevance, and IFAD performance. All projects have at least more than 80% of projects have rated these three criterion as moderately satisfactory and above. On the other end of the spectrum, you have sustainability, government performance, and efficiency, which where projects 60% or approximately 60% of projects have rated these particular criterion as not only as moderately satisfactory. In other words, the ones that have rated them moderately unsatisfactory and below are around 40%. So when we looked at the longer term trends, and by this we mean projects completed between 2007 and 2018, there were four patterns that emerged. And here we are talking about ratings of moderately satisfactory and above. In other words, what we call positive ratings. So there are four main patterns. One pattern was where criteria have displayed a flat or slightly decreasing trend. And you see it on the left top corner. And here you have relevance, effectiveness, and IFAD performance. So there's a flat or slightly decreasing trend, but there's no clear-cut trend here. On the other hand, there were 5 criteria that showed declining trend. And with this, we mean ratings are declining more than 10% between 2013-15 and 2016-18. And here we have 5 criteria, as you see on the right top corner. Rural poverty impact, innovation, gender, scaling up, and government performance. In particular, government performance has been let's say the least, has not performed as well as others, and that's depicted by the dotted line at the bottom of that particular graphic. Then we have 2 criteria, sustainability and efficiency, which after a sustained period of showing slightly declining trends, this year showed an uptick. And this you see it on the bottom left-hand corner. Finally, 2 criteria, environment, natural resource management, and adaptation to climate change, have shown quite positive trends, especially in terms of what it concerns environment, natural resource management, that has been on an upward trend since almost 2010, 2012. So the ARRI this year, we looked at past 3 years of evaluations, independent evaluations of completed projects, and we found a number of factors that have been recurring. In other words, evaluations have talked about these particular criteria repeatedly in the past 3 years, and these factors affect or have affected IFAD-supported projects design and implementation. On the left-hand side, you have design-related factors, and on the right-hand side, you have implementation-related factors. I won't go into details here, but if you read the ARRI report, you will find more details on this matter. Now, when it comes to what we call in IFAD loan lending activities, and here we mean partnership building, country-level policy engagement, and knowledge management. In terms of these 3 criteria, if we look between 2006-8 to 2017-19, you see there is no clear trend in terms of The ARRI also synthesized findings and lessons from non-lending performance, and we found that when used as a combination, the communication tools has worked well for knowledge management criteria. But knowledge remains still confined largely to the project level. It has still not contributed as sufficiently as expected to the higher level corporate or policy processes. Partnerships with government have definitely been fruitful, with IFAD being the partner of choice in several countries for agriculture. But collaboration with the Rome-based agencies has been, incipient, while with other development agencies, it's uneven or even limited. IFAD's strategic and structured support and actions for what concerns policy engagement have not always matched the scope of the objectives of engagement and the scale of the activities that are required to achieve them. Finally, we all know that non-lending activities are critical for operational effectiveness and enhancing IFAD's contribution to the SDGs. However, the level of ambition that is there in country strategies for achieving non-lending objectives is not always matched with the resources that is required to achieve that ambition. Now, we looked at also findings and lessons from country program performance, and we looked at also the areas of corporate priorities. As we know, there are 4 areas of corporate priorities: gender, climate, nutrition, and youth. Now, country programs are indeed strategically oriented and aligned with the policies and priorities of both IFAD and government. This is what the evaluations found. However, risk mitigation measures may not always be specific or adapted to the context, or even sufficiently matched with the availability of resources and the means to manage risks. When it comes to gender and climate, good progress has been made in projects. And this has been through better defined gender strategies and action plans. So we're seeing a lot of better defined strategies in projects. And importantly, climate is now part of several country programs' strategic objectives, and that is important. However, when it comes to nutrition and youth, there is still a lack of data and evaluability of outcomes. It is difficult to evaluate the outcomes related to these, and that has actually hampered the assessment of these two corporate priorities. So to quickly end, I have just last two slides. So to recap, the majority of ratings remain in the moderately satisfactory above zone. However, there are multi-year downward trends, although as we noticed, there are some differences and exceptions. The strategic focus of IFAD's country programs has adapted to the changing context. However, the synergies between lending and non-lending still need to be better exploited in order to achieve strategic objectives. The performance of IFAD-supported projects can be linked to several design issues that I showed you in the slide earlier. Here I've mentioned 4, which is addressing the specific context, having differentiated targeting strategies, having the right partners for results, and finally learning from past experience. These are factors that are important in the design of new projects and have to be looked into. When it comes to implementation challenges, there are several recurring, 2 of which are to ensure the challenges to ensure that the targets of time and quality that were set at the time of design are being met even during the implementation. And secondly, adapting to changes in social, political, natural, and development landscape. As you know, we live in increasingly dynamic times, and this presents a key challenge for implementation. However, both these and other implementation challenges require strong attention by project management units and IFAD's implementation support. Now, in mainstreaming nutrition and youth, IFAD can draw valuable lessons learned from its progress in gender and climate. Good progress has been made and there are valuable lessons to be learned. However, for these two, nutrition and youth, as mentioned earlier, we still need to collect sufficient and reliable data as a top priority. We saw there's been a larger decline for certain criteria in the last 5 periods, including government performance. And this warrants further examination by ARRI strategic products. The ARRI can only presents what has happened, it reports, but to do a deep analysis, ARRI's other strategic products will be used. And finally, the ARRI calls for IFAD-wide reflection and addressing the recurring issues as a priority. With this, I come to the end of my presentation, and I'd like to mention at this point that what Roxy had earlier mentioned about the poll that we are running, and the slide where I showed you the recurring factors. This is what the ARRI found out through any evaluations, but we would also like the audience to share their own experience and knowledge about these particular recurring factors. And we decided to have a poll where you are encouraged to give your top 3 factors that you feel are important both in design and implementation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hans-Diep. We have just launched the poll. So if you just take a minute and click on that polling icon that you have on the bottom of your screen, you see the poll. And so we encourage you to take the time during this, during the conversation to go and cast your vote. So without further ado, allow me to introduce you to our panelists. We have the pleasure of an honor of having our very own colleague Rasha Omar, who is our country director for India and the hub head for Asia and Pacific. Welcome to Rasha. We have the pleasure of having Johanna Panelists, our lead evaluation officer in the Independent Office of Evaluation. The pleasure of having Ulash Demirak, our country director for Ethiopia and Eastern Southern Africa, and truly an honor to have His Excellency Dr. Kaba Urgesa, the State Minister from the Republic, the State Minister of Agriculture from the Republic of Ethiopia. So welcome to you all, and I would also like to acknowledge Donald Brown, our Associate Vice President for Program Management Department, who will be sharing his reflections and thoughts on the way forward at the end of the panel discussion. So, without further ado, let's get the show on the road. Now, Hans Diep, in his presentation of the highlights of the 2020 ARRI, showed us that, as development workers, our ultimate goal is to design and implement a successful and a sustainable and an impactful intervention in partnership with government. So I want to kick us off with a question to Rasha. Now, Rasha, as many of you know, has extensive experience as country program manager and as country director. So Rasha, in your extensive experience, can you please share some of the common challenges relating to government's responsibility as you went along implementing projects, and share how you worked with government to overcome these challenges?
Thank you, Roxy, and good afternoon and good evening to all, and thank you very much to IOE for inviting me to this panel. So Roxy, I'll take your question in two parts. The first one is to reflect on the responsibility of government during implementation, and the second on how I and the country team work with government during implementation to overcome some of the challenges that were also highlighted in the ARRI report. Now, first, on government responsibility during implementation, I just wanted to say that government performs really four functions during the implementation of an investment project. There is the clear function of being a borrower, which is the role that Ministry of Finance plays. Then there is the role of oversight and steering of the project, as well as creating an enabling environment for the implementation and scaling up of the project. And that's usually the responsibility of the line ministry. And then finally, there is the role of implementation, which is, in our jargon, is usually delegated to project management units. Now, as you can see, these functions are key and they are performed by different government entities. And for me, as a country director, as well as a country team member, what has been most challenging is to make sure that the investment project that IFAD is financing is relevant and owned by the government. Taking into consideration that usually these investments are 6 years long, sometimes even more. And during this period, necessarily have about at least two changes in government with different administrations. You may also have one major climatic event and a crisis situation that would need adaptation. So in order to manage all these uncertainties, what is required and what many of our country teams do is basically ensure constant coordination with all government entities, making sure that there's very good communication about the investment projects and what they're trying to achieve, how they are connected to the policies of the government, what results they are generating, and also to make sure that government entities, whether from Ministry of Finance or line ministry, are also actively participating in the supervision of the investment projects, as well as participating in the regular stocktake of the country programs. Now, I must say that a lot of this coordination work has been made much easier with onboarding of country program officers. They've played a tremendous role, as well as through decentralization, so bringing IFAD closer to member states. One additional thing that I wanted to add is in low-income countries such as Sudan and Congo, where I have worked, there was also considerable capacity building of counterparts in the Ministry of Finance as well as the Ministry of Agriculture. And the purpose of this capacity building was really to build institutional memory of the IFAD-funded investments, what kind of procedures they follow, and what kind of results they have generated. And this also helped us to invest in champions within the government who know IFAD well, who know our business model and understand it, and also know that you need to build also great support, because usually IFAD projects are located in more remote areas and with very disadvantaged communities. And we also use a very, let's say, process-intensive procedures, especially in terms of participation and consultation, to build empowerment among poorer communities. So for this, really champions were required, and usually built either around leaders or mid-level managers as well in the concerned ministries. So I'll stop here, Roxy, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Rasha. This was, this was truly a boots on the ground account as to what happens in IFAD-funded projects. Thank you for it. It was actually refreshing to hear you talk about it. Let me now move to Ulash. You just heard Rasha telling her experience as to how she's worked with government to deliver sustainable and impactful projects. Now, one of the challenges that the ARRI has highlighted is the high turnover of project management unit staff, and this has been forever. It isn't anything new. Now, I know that as IFAD country program manager, as country director, you're not involved in the selection and the retention of the project management unit staff. But this said, and also as a follow-on to what Rasha just described, as part of implementation support that you provide, if you could tell us as to how you manage to address this challenge of high turnover in a way to retain talent. And again, going back to what Rasha said, this whole concept of keeping the institutional memory within a project. So the retention of talent within the project management units.
All right, thank you very much. And first of all, let me say that I think the context in which we operate, of course, varies country by country very much. And as you already said, really the program implementing teams are generally embedded in the national systems and not directly reporting to IFAD. So we have somewhat limited influence. In Ethiopia, for instance, the greatest challenge that we are facing is non-competitive salaries. And especially at the local level, where staff seek other opportunities to move to other development projects by bilateral development partners, and so on. But I think that beyond this is also a very normal phenomenon. And I think we have to recognize that this is also part of a positive trajectory, a trajectory that offers a lot of opportunities and in which staff and the productive resources are being mobile. So I would also look at it with a note of positivism and really remember that even if we are building capacity through giving this opportunity for staff to learn in an IFAD project or in an IFAD-funded project, that this capacity normally remains in the system. So we are making a contribution to development overall, even if it is not coming out in our log frames. But let me come to really what we can do to avoid losing the valuable resources that we are very often helping to nurture and helping to build up to make a major contribution. And I would like to highlight, like in any cognitive profession, also program staff are typically mostly motivated by purpose, by a certain level of autonomy, and by a certain level of proficiency. These are the things that motivate professionals globally. And I think that especially giving them some recognition and the ability to grow personally and grow professionally can go a long way in giving them a motivation to stay on, even if they are not getting the optimum best salary or conditions of service. So there are various ways through which we can, as IFAD, really help our implementing agencies to motivate their staff and retain the talent. First of all, by simply focusing on results and helping staff to achieve them, helping staff to grow and in challenging tasks. I think this is a very motivating environment in which people usually see purpose in what they're doing. Then also by empowering project staff to really own and lead their own programs, and to motivate them by really giving them the feeling that they're in the driving seat and giving them the necessary autonomy to make important decisions. But then also I think we can motivate project staff through opportunities for growth, of course. Very often we are moving from one program phase to another one, and very often we are scaling them up. So they are gaining influence, they are gaining impact. Then, of course, simply recognizing talent and outstanding performance, and then helping to provide platforms to share for greater visibility, and by linking staff to a wider community of practice, as we do when we do exchange visits or organize workshops or major events where programs have the opportunity to showcase their work even into international settings. Of course, publishing results and all of this goes into the same domain. But then finally, I think it is important really to offer also career opportunities, training courses, engagement of experts sometimes to come and provide really expert advice and hands-on training on the job. So everything that really increases and enhances the proficiency of the staff members involved. And for instance, we have just launched a policy leadership development program for really very selected staff across Africa that have this opportunity to really benefit from cutting edge leadership knowledge and increase their impact and influence on policy. So these just a couple of examples what we are doing currently to really work with our teams and encourage them to stay in the strong role.
Thank you, Ulash. This was also a very nice and succinct kind of leadership 101 that you gave us all. So thank you for that. Yeah, again, it was very pleasant to hear it, and I have no doubt that you are applying what all those things that you mentioned. And I think one of the things that you said that really stuck with me was that you are building the capacity. You may lose it, but it's a capacity that remains in the system. So it may not be in our log frame, but it goes into somebody else's log frame. So, and these are the contributions that often are not measured or get lost in translation. So I think also, as development workers, is something we need to keep in the back of our mind. So thank you for that. Okay, now over to Joanna. So Joanna, Fabrizio in his remarks highlighted the important role of government as IFAD's partner. and how performance of government also has a very, very strong bearing on the efficiency and sustainability of operations. You, in 2018, led the IOE's evaluation synthesis report on partnerships. Now, if you could share with us some of the important findings of the independent evaluations regarding IFAD and government's partnership at a more strategic level that have had a bearing on IFAD's operations. If you want to unmute yourself.
I'm going to talk about some of the findings of, from this partnership synthesis, but also some broader issues which we observe in a number of synthesis evaluations which we have done over the last year. So some of the recurrent issues and the challenges which IFAD has to address also in a broader level beyond individual programs. First, let me talk, because I'm an evaluator, let me talk about government performance as a concept and how we evaluate. And actually, it is a very difficult concept because it's complex and somewhat convoluted. It encompasses a lot of different elements and aspects, and you can look at government performance at a number of different levels, at the level of operations, but also more at a kind of, what Russia has outlined as a partner, borrower. And obviously, it also affects the other performance criteria. So just saying government performance alone, it's not easy to insulate, but because it also affects the other performance criteria. There's also an issue which I find is that government performance as an evaluation criteria, it compartmentalizes responsibilities somewhat, so dividing it responsibilities between IFAD and government. And from a partnership perspective, we also have a joint responsibility for results, which we should not forget. I mean, there are, of course, individual and respective roles and responsibilities, but there's also a joint responsibility for results. So let me talk about some of the recurrent issues which we look at and we find. And one aspect we'll always look at is fiduciary management. I must say, from a point of evaluation, we don't find many issues because by the time we come as evaluators, most of these fiduciary issues have also already been addressed in one way or the other. And also we are not auditors. So this is not something which we would find, as a very important point, issue sticking out. What we find, though, is, of course, the quality of the M&E systems. So we have issues of poor data quality. We have non-performing systems. We didn't have the problem of M&E data not being used for management decision. And very often we find that M&E is mostly done to comply with reporting requirements. I mean, here again, we have an issue of, shared responsibility as well. And we know that IFAD has been changing requirements a number of times over the last years, which has also led to a lot of confusion on the side of our partners. Then probably the biggest issue, which we see as the issue of implementation delays and low implementation qualities. And here comes the point of capacities, which both Russia and Ulaj have talked about. And of course, we have capacities, low capacities at different levels. First, we have the technical qualification of the PMU, and in particular to handle complex projects and or to provide specialist expertise on certain topics. This could be cross-cutting topics like gender, where people are not familiar with, or pro-poor targeting. But it could also be specialist knowledge, like on rural finance, on infrastructure, where we don't have the expertise within the PMU. And then it's a problem on how we bring in this expertise into the PMU. There's also an issue of very often about the technical competencies and mandate of the cooperating ministry. And we may talk about it later. So if we are partnering with one ministry, technical ministry, like the Ministry of Agriculture, it may not have a lot of knowledge on how to run a rural finance project. So, then the question is, how are we going about it? So the choice of our partner is somehow also very important in this respect. And finally, we have the issues in capacities is the enabling institutional structures and the effective coordination mechanisms, which go beyond the capacity of an individual ministry or partner. So this is quite, when we talk about capacities, there's quite a lot of different things we have to talk about. Let me now turn to some of the challenges which we found in our synthesis and evaluations, which are, still, as IFAD, I think, is still struggling to address. First is the issue of decentralization. So how do we work in decentralized governance settings? Usually we tend to work with the central ministry, and this is then very challenging in countries where we have implementation delegated to local government. For example, we saw that in Nigeria or Kenya. I mean, in India, we have yet a different setup. But what we find there is especially weak capacities on the ground. Yeah, if we have worked with different local ministries, so we have very low capacities, and we also have the issue on how can IFAD effectively support them on the ground. I mean, when based in Delhi, how would you work with a local government in whatever state? Then there's, of course, the challenge of fragile situations, where again we have very weak capacities. And in the past, IFAD often tend to resort to working with non-government organizations. So this is yet another a big challenge. And then last but not least, we have the problem of aid coordination. So those who have been in the business for some years may remember that there once was something like Paris Declaration and then followed by Busan Declaration. So there was a big drive to coordinate development partners in certain sectors. So this has somehow weakened. And this is, of course, also a challenge for IFAD then to reach out effectively to other partners and also to government partners and get a clear division of labor and ownership. And it increases the transaction costs for working with government partners also for IFAD. So, what do we have to do about it? I mean, first of all, of course, we have to have a realistic assessment of the capacities and the context. And I think many of our evaluations say we need an institutional analysis, need to understand with whom we partner and what for. We need also from IFAD side, we need consistent requirements and support, right? I mean, many of our operations and many of our partnerships, they also run for a long time, and often IFAD goes through various strategic cycles in the meantime. So, and it's not easy for our, also our implementing staff to take, the partners with them throughout all these changes. And finally, there needs to be a strategic engagement beyond individual operations. I think both Russia and Ulachev have pointed that out as well. So it's not that partnerships does not end with a particular operation. So thank you very much, Roxanne.
Thank you very much, Johanna. Yes, you're absolutely right. That strategic engagement is what is needed, and I think also perhaps this also change in mindset about moving from compliance. It's like when you tell a child not to do something until the child understands that if he or she does that, they're going to hurt themselves. So yes, there is that. I guess. I don't know, for lack of better word, like, you have to mature in order to get it, that it's not compliance. It's just like wearing masks. So, okay, so we're not complying. We're wearing masks to protect ourselves and other people. So yes, I know this has always been a challenge. Thank you for that. And now it is really an honor and pleasure to go to His Excellency, Dr. Kaba. So, sir, first of all, thank you very much for making time. I know you have a very, very busy schedule, so thank you very much for making time to be with us today. Now, you know that one of the common findings of evaluation is that the benefits attained by a project intervention are not sometimes retained after the project comes to an end. This can either be because of lack of funds or insufficient commitment. So my question to you is, what in your view are some of the enabling factors that allow government to own development projects? And what can IFAD do to make sure this ownership is indeed a partnership? And this, in a way, goes back to what Johanna was talking about. And what should governments do to ensure that benefits of projects are sustainable even after the project is closed and the donor leaves. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Roxana, and all the participants. I think, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I'm very glad actually to participate on this discussion. To begin with, I think one of the most enabling factor for us in Ethiopia, the first one is maybe the project manager, Ulach himself, is an enabling factor for us. It may be funny for people to hear this. For me, he is not a project to be managed, and he is the best person to manage the project. So that's why I'm saying he's one of the enablers for us. And to exactly go to the issues, I think I can mention 4 important points. Of course, we can mention a lot of them. 4 of them are actually can be considered for this particular discussion as an enablers. The first one is, for me, the alignment with government of Ethiopia's systems and procedures is one of the enabling factors for us, especially those governing public expenditure management and procurement, and integration of program implementation into relevant institutions in decentralized government structures are said to be one of the enabling factors for us. The second enabling factor, which I want to mention here, is there is also a greater empowerment of beneficiaries to take lead role through their grassroots institution in program implementation. And I think this could be an experience elsewhere as well, but when the beneficiaries are actually empowered, they are really more supportive than actually the challenge themselves. The third one is actually the cooperation with private agricultural service providers is also again one of another enabling factor which I just want to mention, which is we had a stronger partnership and harmonization with other development partners and other stakeholders in the sector. So this is considered to be one of the enabling factors. And the fourth point I just want to mention is that the program coordination, management and implementation arrangements are well integrated into the decentralized regional administration at the outset. Harmonization and alignment of these arrangements with national policies, procedures, and institutional frameworks are also to be considered one of the enabling factors for us. Having said this, what can IFAD do? For us, IFAD should continue its implementation support, which could be on-job trainings, experience sharings, can help with these PCMUs in implementing partners and users community to improve their capacity in shouldering their responsibilities. So this is, so we are requesting or maybe advising the IFAD to continue its implementation support in the long run. And second, increase the resource mobilization from the IFAD side. This is one important point I want to mention. Otherwise, I think IFAD, as I think Hans Diep said, I share that issue. It is a partner of choice for us. So I am trying to prove that the saying goes with us as Ethiopians, actually. One common findings which need to be mentioned here is that the irrigation schemes are actually funded and they've been constructed and they've been handed over to Irrigation Water Users Association. Still, we observed that this the Irrigation Water Users Association are still they tend to be the government dependent rather than actually becoming stronger and maintaining by themselves the operation and maintenance issues. This is one thing I think we need to improve in the future by engaging with them. And of course, we had different encounters with them, but still we see this tendency, and that will affect actually the long-term services of the scheme. Then after saying this, what should the government do? In our case, what we we felt is the best way to sustain the benefits of the project is to design community-led projects. So right from the beginning, that communities should involve in it, they should lead it. So this will enable to let the beneficiaries own or take the lead during project implementation, and if they involve right from the beginning, the one common findings which we say will also never come again. So government should initiate that way. The second point here is government support to create the required linkages to output markets is also another important, because if market is there, that they tempted to produce more, then if they produce more, if they get good price for their product, definitely more production with the project, the schemes can also be sustained. So benefit is one of the area. So the third issue is, in order for irrigation schemes to be viable, that the government should involve technical support after the scheme is over, rather than making this water users association more or less donor-driven dependency. So these are some of the areas I think where the government should intervene. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you for outlining some very concrete actions, which no doubt you and your government will take on. And I don't think that Ulash had ever heard that he was an enabling factor. So Ulash, that you can add in your PES, that you're an enabling factor. And I think that's one of the best compliments that you could have received. Now, I just want to remind the audience that you can go in the Q&A section and ask your questions. We already have some questions which I will be posing in a little while. And also don't forget the polls. So please go into the polling section and cast your vote. This was the intermission break. Now back to the questions. I'm going to go back to Johanna because this is a nice a segue to what His Excellency Dr. Kaba just mentioned. So usually, you know, in our projects, the Ministry of Agriculture is the default partner for the IFAD-funded projects. However, there are also cases where the project relies on a much broader range of government levels and partners, including specialized line ministry, which is something that Rasha mentioned earlier, or provincial governments. So what, according to the IOE evaluation, has been IFAD's experience of working with a wide range of government entities at national level? And what has been the benefits or maybe the drawbacks of these?
Okay, thank you very much. That's a very good question, actually. I mean, as you say, usually we work with the Ministry of Agriculture in most countries, so it's a kind of default ministry. And what we can see, that's in general, it's a very well-established partnership that also avoids many of the what we call teething problems, which you have when you go to new partners. So, for example, you get good domestic co-financing. You don't have to argue a lot about targeting, about gender integration, and all of this. So this is all usually quite works better with the Ministry of Agriculture, depending on the country, of course, but in most cases. We found that just working with the Ministry of Agriculture maybe is quite narrow in certain conditions. For example, if IFAD needs to address issues that are beyond and outside of the mandate of a Ministry of Agriculture, and that was, for example, the case in Egypt for irrigation, which is under the Ministry of Water. So it's very little what one can do, or very limited what one can do if you have only a partnership with the Ministry of Agriculture. And another, drawback maybe is that the partnership with a certain ministry may drive certain types of investments. And we had it, for example, where partnership with a certain ministry in Bangladesh or DRC was driving investments for infrastructure. So you get, you were driven towards a certain type of partnership. on the other hand, we need to be very clear when we work with a lot of partners in some countries, as we did, for example, in Indonesia, in Philippines, and in Sri Lanka. So this increases also the transaction costs for IFAD. So you have to work with more partners. You have to spend more time talking to your different partners and coordinating. And this has very clear problems and associated costs for IFAD. We find that in countries where we work with co-finance, international co-financing partners, we seem to be getting more easily into new partnerships. For example, for ministries outside the Ministry of Agriculture, for example, that was the case in Indonesia. Sorry, I have some construction going on next to me. I hope you don't hear that. And this can be a challenge if you work in parallel operations, where one co-financing or co-funding partner is working with one ministry and we are still working with the Ministry of Agriculture. And then we have, of course, again, it's a different set of problems in some countries where the government tends to narrow our partnerships down to certain preferred partners. For example, we had the issues in Turkey, China, or in Nigeria, okay, where government was not very keen for IFAD to work with the private sector. So this can also happen. Finally, let me say one issue then on why we need to work with more than one partner and more than one partner, if it be it a Ministry of Agriculture or other ministries, is also because of when we look at policy engagement. Very often in our operations, what we find are policy or institutional issues which are beyond the mandate of our key partner ministries. And that can refer to gender, for example, to rural finance, or to value chains, for example, where you need to talk and work with other government partners as well. And that's why it is quite important. So, I mean, as you see, we are still kind of sitting on the fence. I mean, there is both, has pros and cons, these partnerships. I don't want to say if I should necessarily get into many partnerships, but there are clear downsides to it. But, it's working just with very few partners is also not ideal. So it's finding the right balance. And this, of course, depends a lot on the judgment of our country directors, also based in the countries, and what is possible in the specific context. And I think that's the time now to give over to our country directors again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Johanna. This is one of the complexities of development, because there's no cookie cutter approach, and every context is different, and every context needs to be seen within its own reality. Yeah, I don't want to go into a philosophical conversation about the pros and cons of a log frame, because that can also hinder or help, in these situations. I actually want to go back now to His Excellency Dr. Kaba. And sir, I want to ask you, you just heard Joanna, doing the pros and cons of these different types of partnerships, and we don't have, there's no cookie cutter approach. So sir, from where you sit, what are the three things that IFAD and government need to do more of to pave the way towards improved project management, project implementation, and to strengthen the capacity of government and PMUs?
Thank you very much again, Roxana. Roxana is, if I pronounce your name properly, we need to do three things very well. From what I understand, if I properly understood your question. The first one for me is actually institutional sustainability is one of the important issues where we have to work very well. With this regard, the participatory process of scheme establishment, embracing the key stakeholders, is one of the areas where we have to capitalize quite a lot. Then in terms of institutional capacity building, our approach should encompass government institution at the different levels. And the rural producers institution will ensure the skills that exist to continue supporting program-initiated activities after completion. This is when it comes to institutional sustainability. The second important for me is actually financial and commercial sustainability. This is also very important. In this case, the point I need to mention is that the market-led approach to guide investment is meant to foster the culture of the entrepreneurship among smallholder farmers. Linkage to market will ensure that farmers have an avenue through which to dispose of their surplus productions. As long as the established linkage path to the mutually beneficial, the long-run outcomes would be sustainability of incomes for the parties involved. These financial benefits on investment in the sector, coupled with the improved access to finance, will promote sustainability of the financial and commercial sustainability. And the third important point I would like to mention is actually environmental, social, and climatic sustainability. Then we need to ensure this. Then we have our own national Ethiopian environmental assessment procedures, and we have to also fit into SECAP, which is social, environmental, and climate adaptation procedures. These are the three important areas where we have to do more. So in general, I just want to mention, it is good to do together with IFAD and the government, periodic capacity gaps assessment and design a system to address them. Second, allocate resources to curb these capacity gaps. And thirdly, both should try mobilizing resource internationally as well as nationally. If we do that, I think we can really make the project more successful than it is today. And of course, in Ethiopia, I think the project is successful compared to other projects we have. That's what I want to comment again.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. Yes, the capacity gap assessment is, yeah, I guess that is, but for what stage would you recommend that capacity gap assessment be done? Or should it be done periodically?
Yes, periodically, because I mean, Ulach was telling you that there are always, what you say, turnovers here and there. So, I mean, periodically, we need to assess the capacities that is there at the national level, at the regional level, even down to the world and the Kabyle level, where the actual work is done. Then, based on the outcomes of this assessment, I think we have to do readjustment and find some solution for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Ulash, so you heard Johanna talk about, you know, IFAD working with different levels of government, the pros and cons, and yeah, well, not the one size doesn't fit all. But can you please share with us how you and your team have managed to build the capacity at central, state, and local government? This is both, you know, government officials or the project management units so that they can successfully implement the project.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, actually, I agree. I think capacity at all levels is one of the greatest challenges, especially when it comes to complex and very innovative interventions. And definitely, I believe that the ones that we have in Ethiopia are, in the specific context, quite complex and quite innovative. And all this, of course, within a very limited budget, because IFAD has moved deliberately to larger programs. And this is a very efficient way of working, of course, of achieving greater results, greater outreach, greater everything, but also a much better efficiency rate when it comes to our administrative budgets. So we are struggling to serve these large programs that are covering really a multiple of what in some other countries is the case. So I believe, well, we're struggling, but we're struggling, I think, and thank you, Dr. Kaba, for highlighting this. I think we are struggling reasonably successfully. I think one thing that is key is country presence, is being close to our clients, and really having, this enables us to have a couple of local staff members, national staff members who speak the language and who are able to really make the link with the local administration at the different levels and so on. And I think this is absolutely key, because most of these problems are not resolved by a one-off short interaction. They require this continuous engagement and really capacity building and going this journey and learning together. The other one is, of course, punctual expert input that we need to combine with this continuous engagement, so that we are continuously raising the bar and actually really addressing those issues where we are all struggling. Very practical issues very often, where you need really people who have engaged in agricultural value chains, not as consultants or researchers or international professionals or administrators, but as people who have really engaged there and taken risks, maybe farmers and real practitioners. But also, I think what is key is really conducting our supervision process in a mindset of implementation support. We all want the same thing, and we all want to succeed. The government success is IFAD success, and vice versa. So I think really being closely in this and really supporting each other is absolutely key. And then we have to find, I think, a number of innovative ways of mobilizing the necessary resources. This can be through linkages with grant programs, through partnership with other UN agencies, better coordination, because very often, for instance, UNDP is doing a lot of training within the Ministry of Agriculture. So we can combine our efforts and talk to each other so that we can make it mutually beneficial. Then, of course, we can also organize trainings on common issues that we see across the portfolio, and very often the program leads are alerting us that they really need a deepened engagement on certain issues. And then what we are doing a lot here in Ethiopia is really mobilizing resources also from other development partners for parallel small projects, maybe grant finance projects that can leverage really the capacity and the TA and provide directly TA, as we are doing it with Bill and Melinda Gates in the case of the small-scale irrigation program for all the market access aspects and so on. So another way very quickly is, of course, SSTC, the organization of exchange visits, and very effective, especially if you combine policymakers, practitioners, and beneficiaries from the different levels of the country. So this way you get really very much out of these visits. And then lastly, however, in a huge country like Ethiopia, we have to think in a growth mindset. This means even if we are engaging really at the federal level, we have to nurture the leadership and the capacity for the central government to really take along the regions. I think Dr. Kaba referred to how everything has to be embedded in the regions. And I think in Ethiopia particularly, they're doing a very good job in really empowering and enabling the regions to be in the lead, and overall the decentralized government institutions. So with this, let me quickly thank Dr. Kaba for the nice words, and we'll continue to strive for getting better at what we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ulash. Thank you for that. Okay, we're going to come to the Q&A in just a few minutes. But before that, before the Q&A, I want to pose one last question, and the last question goes to Rasha. So Rasha, let's say that Donald gives you a magic wand and he tells you, Rasha, you can change the project cycle. So what is the one thing that you would change to allow IFAD and government to pave the way forward towards a smoother project implementation?
Thank you very much, Roxy. So I've been thinking about this, and my response to Donald would be actually to re-look at the government and IFAD role in the project cycle. Governments come to IFAD not just for the financing, but also for the expertise we bring. So this should really come out in the project cycle. And as mentioned earlier by Dr. Kaba, there are countries like, for example, Ethiopia and others who have systems, procedures, ideas, and can actually develop their own pipeline of projects that they can submit to IFAD as well as to other donors. Now, I have discovered that in the Asian Development Bank, they actually have just the financing instrument for this, which they provide to the governments. It's a loan product to help develop pipeline of projects, as well as help develop the internal capacity of the governments to implement these projects. So I was thinking that looking back at the project cycle that we have, perhaps to add one additional stage just before we go into project design, which is pipeline preparation. And in this pipeline preparation, it's not just about the ideas and concepts that the government is developing, but also about their internal capacity. And if possible, something similar to the ADB loans could be considered. The second is usually we go into design, very elaborate process, but there is one piece of design which is key and is becoming really key to many low middle income countries and upper middle income countries. It's how ready is the project for implementation? Because in these countries, they come to IFAD for better solutions than what they are already doing, and for faster solutions and faster results than what they are already achieving. So making sure that of implementation readiness and that procedures for implementation really capture the expertise and knowledge for, let's say, efficient implementation are one of the things that need more attention in our design process. And then finally on policy, so currently it may not be in the project cycle, but it's also something that is worth looking at. And I see in the chat box that Francisco has made a number of suggestions of how to combine the policy engagement with the investment that is being funded by IFAD. So these are some of the ideas for tweaking the project cycle. Thank you, Roxy.
Thank you, Rasha. And I'm sure that Donald has heard you loud and clear. And he will make sure that the project cycle is modified so that you have a pipeline preparation stage. Very good. Well, thank you very much to all of you. I'm going to now go to the Q&A. There are some questions. Since we have mentioned Donald, you're not supposed to answer this question right now, Donald, but maybe in your remarks, you can sort of like weave it in. There's a question which I think probably it's best for you. And it is, should IFAD undertake more rigorous political economic analysis to understand the risks of engaging with turbulent political environments? So if you want to keep that for your remarks. Okay, so the question that had most votes, actually this one that I just read for Donald also had quite a number. I had the same amount of votes, so it was one of the top ones. Is at operational level, it is often observed that governments are not prompt in replacing key vacant positions among project management staff. How can this aspect be improved to guarantee continuity of operational efficiency? Since this is a government-related question, if I may please ask Dr. Kaba to take this question.
Thank you. I think we need to improve our system of procurement and employment, and then retaining capacity. As it is said, actually, in Ethiopia, actually, except at the regional level, at world level, we actually operate with a focal person. And this focal person actually get their salary from the government. And as Ola said, that is no more very attractive, but it's still, that's what we can offer for the time being. And I think everybody has to be sure that if we offer what we can, and if we can really promote these people on the basis of their efficiency of delivering what has been given to them, I think this is one way. Second, whenever we have somebody leaving the project, or maybe a new project is coming in, I think we need to improve our procurement system, speed it up, and then accordingly, I think we can really fill the gaps, which is maybe vacant.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so the next one is, and I think I want to give this one to Rasha. If a lack of data makes it difficult to evaluate issues of nutrition and youth, what efforts are being made by IFAD and government to improve data collection process on nutrition and youth? Now, I must admit, I don't know your portfolio, but I'm sure you have nutrition and youth projects. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Roxy. So on nutrition, my understanding is the ARRI was done on the cohort of projects closing between 2016 and 2018. So maybe these projects were not directly reporting on nutrition, but I'm sure they were reporting on food security as well as on anthropometric measures, which in the previous MME system, which we call the RIMS, used to be measured pretty regularly. And we used to also, until the measurement changed a couple of years ago. So in the current portfolio, for example, in India, we have projects that still report anthropometric measurements, as well as on security. Cohort of project has, captures now either the food insecurity score or the dietary diversity score as well. And the other indicators that have been developed as part of the outcome indicators for IFAD on the topic. Now, similarly on youth, so certain projects that do have youth as a specific target group do capture the numbers. So it's true, we may not be reporting on number of youth, but we know the beneficiaries of the activities that are directly targeting youth, and we can generate the figures from there. So these are all proxy methods to really report from the old portfolio. Now, with the new guidelines for youth-sensitive projects as well as nutrition-sensitive projects, these are now incorporated into the project log frames, and the teams are being trained on how to disaggregate the data further to capture the youth, and this is key in the basic information that is being collected about beneficiary households and participants. And then the other is on nutrition. So we've introduced now, as part of the baseline surveys as well as outcome surveys, question about the dietary diversity in order to capture nutrition aspects. So I hope that that responds to the question.
Thank you, Rasha. Thanks a lot. Now, Ulash and I have had this history of doing some knowledge management together. So at least when I was very young, Ulash is still very young. So I'm gonna direct this knowledge question to you, Ulash, in the memory of the good old days. So knowledge, the question is, knowledge being confined largely to project level and not contributing to the corporate or policy processes means that there is work to do, means that there is work to do to improve the situation. So how can you improve the situation whereby knowledge is basically at project level and it isn't necessarily contributing to the corporate and the policy processes? How basically, how can you make that explicit knowledge at project level more, rather the tacit knowledge more explicit?
Yeah, thank you very much. And spot on for part of my role, because I'm also heading here the Africa Union SSTC and Knowledge Center for Africa. So actually linking up to our good old days with Roxy. I think there's a lot, first of all, you can do at the country level. And actually IFAD has a tradition under maintaining what we call CPMTs, Country Program Management Teams. And, you know, this became very fashionable also within IFAD as a precursor to what we have now, the program delivery teams. But really everything originated at the country level with country program management teams, bringing the various stakeholders involved in the IFAD portfolios and the IFAD country programs together so that they can really exchange knowledge and see linkages and learn from each other. So that's one thing. And we are doing this very purposefully in most countries. I think regular knowledge events where we feature certain topics that programs can share, certain success stories and so on. And where also problems are being discussed that can be resolved by the complementarity from these projects. Then, of course, we have larger communities of practices that we can link projects to. We have one for rural finance, we have different ones on water management in East Africa, and so on. So we are also proactive in linking projects to these ones. And actually, where I'm sitting here in Addis Ababa, I'm surrounded by the consultative group for international agricultural research, the various research centers of the CGIAR, and they are also delivering very good communities of practices for this international exchange. Now, of course, I think what we are doing to some extent, we are doing a lot of to-do notes, a lot of you know, knowledge products and so on, trying to inventorize our GPR unit, the global engagement unit that is in charge of SSTC, has established a rural solutions portal where innovative aspects are being captured and made available or made accessible to the broader audience. And then, of course, all the SSTC initiatives that we can really do to help programs learn from each other. Now, specifically for policy, I think there's no better way than really engaging in the sector working groups that are quite a common phenomenon in almost all countries where I've worked. So these sector working groups really provide a platform for government-led policy processes that, of course, bring together the stakeholders for learning and for then feeding the lessons and the joint analysis into the policy processes. And we have done some interesting work on these water users associations that I see we will also take further. Lastly, let me just say one thing that we are currently working on is a call center approach, where basically we want to map the various knowledge networks that exist that are very complex and build a channel so that this can be accessed directly from projects and practitioners in need, so that we can really link up practitioners who are looking for a very specific expertise with the existing capacity in other countries or in other regions that they may not be aware of. So I think there's a lot happening. but what I see from this question is we have to give more visibility to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ulash. Just a reminder, folks, that please go into the polling section and cast your votes on those recurrent factors that Hans-Diepe outlined at the very beginning. Now, I'm going to ask this one last question. This goes to Johanna. And Johanna, I want you to wear your evaluator hat in answering this question. And because this is a question about, okay, let me read out the question, and then we can talk about it. So the question is, implementation recommendations given by supervision missions are sometimes not followed up completely by PMUs. And so this is perhaps sometimes how you guys feel when the evaluation recommendations are not followed, right? And so year after year, you have to say those same things. And the question continues to read, or there is a delay in their implementation. What steps can be taken to avoid this problem? So it's very similar to the kind of challenge that you guys face regularly.
Okay, I mean, I suppose that Rasha and Ulash, they have seen these cases and can fill us in. I mean, from an evaluation point of view, first of all, for evaluation recommendations, we have a system, right? And they are centrally tracked, those recommendations, and you know, they have to be addressed in one way or the other. I can see that now with the ORMS that we also have probably a system where we are more it's easier for us to track supervisions and agreed actions in supervision in the system. If it is tracked, to what extent it is tracked, I mean, this is of course something which probably you know, PMD and Donald can be answering about. I mean, from my evaluator's point of view, the situations where I saw that supervision recommendations have not been followed up is in particular where we had this composition of supervisions changing a lot. Right, so we had different teams coming. I mean, new people being pulled together into missions, and then you know, which resulted in a number of sometimes contradictory or inconsistent or not followed up recommendations across a number of supervisions. And you know, wherever we have seen this in projects which we evaluated, we have highlighted this as a weakness to be addressed, to make sure that supervisions are consistently staffed, and that you have, of course, the expertise, but that you don't change your approach and the issues which you are covering, you know, from supervision to supervision, right? So that's as much as I can say. I mean, whenever we see this, we will flag it as an issue. So what needs to be done, right? Again, I think there needs to be a central monitoring plus a kind of, you know, project management level follow up on this. I don't know if Rasha or Ulash want to add to this question.
Yeah, I was going to go to them. So Ulash, you go, and then Rasha.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the first thing I would like to say to this is we shouldn't have any recommendations. I tell this every mission, we want agreed actions, okay? And it is about really, I think these times have to be over, where a mission comes in, flies in, spends 3-4 days with the project, feels they have all the knowledge, go back to the hotel room, and then hand in the report that nobody understands. I think what is really the key in these supervision and implementation support missions is that we really engage with the practitioners and really understand where they are coming from, make them part of the solution. When I worked in Ghana, even, you know, I asked the project teams who are writing very good English to write the inputs to the supervision reports, write the recommendations, and even present them at the wrap-up meeting, so that we really nurture a sense of ownership. And then I think it is not as important anymore. The second thing is to rather than do biannual missions, do monthly meetings or bi-monthly meetings, depending on the needs, where you review where you stand and can come back and answer questions and explore ways to help facilitate the implementation of any agreed actions, but not recommendations, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ulash. And Rasha?
Yes, thank you, Roxy. I think Ulach and Joanna made excellent points. So I'll just add perhaps one more is to keep also the agreed actions, limited, not a long list. What I have seen is projects that get, that agree on a number of remedial actions, which are concise, to the point, and address the core issues, are usually able to address these issues much better. And the other is, we also need to recognize that perhaps some of the recommendations that we make, or some even of the actions that we agree upon, may not actually prove to be very realistic or feasible. So there should also be this flexibility of reviewing the supervision agreed actions, and as Ulach mentioned, when this is done on a monthly, in a monthly conversation with the project teams and the government teams, then it's possible to adjust as we go. Thank you, and over to you, Roxy.
Thank you very much, Rasha. Yes, they have to be realistic. They can't be pie in the sky rather, kind of recommendations. Absolutely. Okay, I'm cognizant of our time, and I know Donald has been I can see him taking notes, unless he was doing his emails. We don't know that. But just before giving the floor to Donald, I want to close this panel with one last question to all of the panelists. And I'm going to start with Dr. Kaba. So, sir, from where you sit, what would be the one factor, just one factor, and this is a soundbite answer, that can help you improve the capacity and performance of government and project management units exponentially? I know we don't like the word exponential anymore because of the virus, but in this case, how can we, what is it that we need to do to improve it exponentially?
Thank you once again. I think from my side, I just want to emphasize on empowering the beneficiaries actually to take a leading role through their grassroots institutions. If we do this, I think it could help the project managers, and it could help also the government, or the both actors can easily discharge their duties within a relatively shorter time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ulash?
For me, it would be something like illimited flexibility, especially in a time of high level of volatility, complexity, uncertainty, and ambiguity that we are facing right now.
I like that, illimited flexibility. Okay, well, we just have to see how this will translate in reality. Joanna?
Yeah, probably similar to what Uda said. I mean, it's adjusting our expectations to what can actually be done. I think it's a mutual thing, and also taking a supportive approach, right? So we can't expect our partners to follow every twist and turn, and from what we think is needed. So this is quite important.
Thank you, and Rasha.
Sorry. So I would like to make two proposals. One is building on the experience of the Bangladesh country program, which is one of the among the best performing ones in IFAD. Now, the advantage there is that there's been continuous investment in local institutions. It's parastatal institutions, but they have been supported really to grow. Their mandate is very similar to IFAD. There's good synergy. And there's been continuous investment in their capacity building by the government and by various development partners. And today they are, very effective implementing agencies for both policy and programs. So they've moved really beyond the projects. And the second is there are certain procedures that we also need to work on in IFAD. Similar to what we've done with financial management, procurement, there are two others which we would need to look into. One is human resource management. And again, I refer to example that Francisco is proposing, which are these performance-based contracts, but also the whole evaluation and learning process in terms of staff appraisal. And the second is monitoring and evaluation, so that there's data for decision making, which is something that IOE has also been highlighting. Thank you, Roxy, and over to you.
Thank you very much. This has been this has been a very, very insightful and rich conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. For me, it was truly a pleasure, and it was wonderful to be able to reconnect with you all. Now we are lucky to have Donald with us today, and so Donald, you have been hearing all the various ideas and pearls of wisdom for the last hour and a half. So if I may now turn to you and ask you to give your reflections and, what are the steps that you and your team are going to be taking to address the challenges and the issues that you heard this afternoon. So over to you.
Thank you, Roxy, and thank you to IOE for organizing this learning event today. I think the event's been a really good opportunity to not only just have a bit of an overview of the 2020 ARRI, but particularly to try and have a discussion in depth on a specific theme. And I would really like to thank His Excellency Dr. Kaba for giving us his time today and giving us his insights. I think your insights, but those of the whole panel's been really good. And thank you, Roxy, for the moderation. I thought it was great, but please don't give out too many magic wands to people to use. So maybe I'll just have a couple of comments on the ARRI and then move on. So just on the ARRI and the overview that was presented for the period 2016 to 18. I mean, I think as management, we agree with the main conclusions there, and particularly some of the ones such as the better linkages between lending and non-lending, but also the issues highlighted, and some of which we've touched on today, such as efficiency and sustainability and government as a partner. I think we discussed a number of them in management's results report for this year to the RIDE, and I'm not going to reiterate all that because we had quite a long discussion at the September EB, but just a couple of issues. We as management have a few concerns relating to the limitations of aggregate ratings in assessing performance and results, and IFAD's evaluation systems tend to rely quite heavily on ratings, both IOE's and our own ones, and ratings can be a bit subjective based on evidence, but I think we need to try and do more to make them more objective. And in that context, we look forward to working with IOE and external experts to improve IFAD's rating systems and methodologies for both the self and the independent evaluation systems. Now, turning to what I've heard this afternoon, and it was a really rich discussion, and I think it's actually, I think two things that stand out for me was, firstly, I think Ulash's comment that actually things are really quite context and country specific. So there's no one size fits all, there's no magic recipe or menu for this. And secondly, was Johanna's comment, which I also really agree with, that in many ways, when you're talking about government ownership and performance, it's really quite complex, because there are so many, it depends how you define it. And there are so many sort of interrelated issues also that you then need to unpick, as I said, around sustainability, around efficiency, and many other aspects. But maybe, just to respond to the question you threw at me from the chat room in terms of more political and economic analysis. I mean, I think it's a really important issue, actually, and I was looking through the chat before you actually gave me that question. I do very much agree with that. And I think I would add or emphasize within it as well the importance of really robust institutional analysis. And that's, you know, that also links very much to the government ownership performance type issue. I think too often, we in IFAD, but generally there's an optimism bias in terms of, you know, the political and economic analysis, but also the institutional analysis, and we need to do it much better. So for all our COSOPs now, and certainly our COSOPs, which are our country strategies, which we do in partnership with government and set the framework for that relationship. For those of countries in fragile situations, we do a fragility assessment, which does try to take a sort of a view that looks much more at political, economic, and institutional fragility in that context. So moving on, and just a few thoughts really to add and reinforce what I heard. For me, the challenge is not so much improving design. We've actually done really well at improving design, as the arm's length, quality assurance, the quality entry scores are now showing. Actually, you know, one can design things. It's all about implementation. You know, the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunities are about implementation. It's when things move from paper to reality, in my view. And in that context, you know, the role of government as a partner is really key. Because, you know, sometimes, you know, I hear a lot about IFAD this and IFAD that and IFAD the other. Well, actually, this is a partnership. And IFAD support, these are government projects which IFAD supports government to implement. IFAD does not implement projects, governments do. They're our partners. And in that context, you've heard a bit of discussion about project management units. And for me, that's a key part of the whole success of a project, because they are really the key delivery unit for government to implement. And I think there's quite, you know, a complex relationship between government effectiveness, country capacity, and project management units, or if you don't mind, I'll just call them PMUs. It's interesting because what we see is government effectiveness is not always directly correlated with income levels. So in other words, countries with lower or higher incomes per capita can be good or bad in terms of government performance. And in some ways, you know, my working hypothesis is in low income cases, capacity can be a real constraint for governments and for PMUs, where in higher income countries, actually government sort of commitment and ownership, it can be often the issue rather than capacity. And in terms of PMUs, I think weak implementation capacities and expertise really affect project efficiency and sustainability. And you know, a key part of government's responsibility in project implementation is to ensure that we have PMUs, and I think a few people said this, you know, PMUs that are fully staffed at the beginning, and so there are not vacancies, and that we get the best people possible into those PMUs. So one of the things that's really important is ensuring that there's transparent merit-based processes in recruiting staff to the PMUs, and not just appointments. So then, building the implementation capacity of these units, we've done a few things. I mean, we've obviously decentralizing our staff is a key aspect, because I think, as Ulesh said, you know, we can work alongside PMUs and government, not only on a sort of a regular basis, but on a day-to-day basis. And as Ulesh says, in many ways, you know, meeting weekly, monthly with the project management units with government really helps in that context. And you know, in IFAD 12, we're looking to decentralize even further from 33 to 45% and have even more in-country footprint and more technical staff in the regions. That should help. We have got a number of global grants trying to build capacity, both on sort of M&E, which just came up, which I think is a really key area. And in some ways is getting more and more challenging. One, to retain M&E staff in PMUs, because, you know, once trained, they're quite a, you know, they're quite an attractive asset to be bought and to be taken by other agencies that pay quite highly, but on results-based management, procurement, etc. And I think the more we look at some of the mainstreaming themes and other issues, in fact, in many ways, the more complex M&E gets. And obviously, as has been mentioned, improving the quality of supervision and implementation support is really, really key. And we look forward to, you know, and challenge in many ways our friends and colleagues in IOE to help us by really giving us, you know, even more specific recommendations from the various evaluations, you know, that will really help us on this issue of government capacity, but also on the performance of the PMUs and the efficiency, sustainability, you know, really tangible, specific recommendations to be really help. And you know, I think at the core of this, national ownership is really key. And without it, we're not going to get anywhere. And that's why our country's strategy development with governments is such a key part of setting that direction for the projects and the portfolios. But also we, you know, government ownership we recognise is, you know, is a tough issue, because the commitment and the will has to be there. And I really thank His Excellency Dr. Kaba for some of those really, really important insights. And I really, that issue about, you know, empowering beneficiaries really resonates with me, because in many ways, empowering beneficiaries and that stakeholder feedback is not only key for implementation, but actually it's key for the sort of the transparency and accountability of governments and of IFAD to the people we're here to help, you know, making sure that they're in the driving seat. So, you know, and I hope decentralization again will help in us having that closer relationship with government and supporting them on the national ownership. One final reflection is we haven't talked much about it, but I think a key issue in this whole thing about government ownership and generally government performance is about domestic counterpart financing as a really important predictor of ownership, performance and sustainability. I mean, our data shows that government contributions represent about 60% of total domestic financing for our projects. And, you know, where counterpart funding is on time, it is very clear up front in projects. I think we do see that they're projects which tend to perform more successfully. Not only is that commitment to ownership, but because then, you know, the domestic contributions blended with, you know, the project financing allows us to really plan properly and implement on time. So just once again, I'd like to thank you, Roxy, for your moderation, for the panel, for their great insights, and for IOE for organising this event. I thought it was a really interesting event, and I look forward to more of them.
Thank you, Donald, and thank you very much for providing your thoughts and reflections and for dedicating time to attend this event. Thanks a lot. Okay, now before closing this event, if I may ask Hansip to just walk us through the poll and tell us what was the result of the poll and give a snapshot of the poll, and then I will ask Fabrizio to provide his closing remarks. So over to you, Hansip.
Right, thank you, Roxy. Right, I'm looking at the poll results, and in terms of the factors related to design, which people feel that IFAD could support, could improve further. So we have at 55%, we have addressing specificity of context, including by identifying risks as the number one area that IFAD design should incorporate. And the other one coming up is incorporating lessons from the past. So people feel that is that is equally important. And the last one in terms of importance is enhancing ownership. It's effective and differentiated social targeting. So these are three factors that the audience feels that design should look more carefully into. When it comes to implementation, we have, it's not unexpected. The quality of project management units is found to be key in ensuring implementation success by audience. And the second, at number 2, is the level of flexibility that the implementation can have in order to adapt to changes that happen to the external context. And the third one, although it's a distant third, is actually the quality of IFAD supervision and implementation support. So those are the results. Thank you.
Thank you, Hasib. And I hope that this actually provides you guys in the evaluation office what you need, for the next round of your various activities. So with that, my gratitude to all of the panel members. Thank you very, very much for your, for your honest and candid comments and insights. I now would like to ask Fabrizio to give his closing remarks. So over to you, Fabrizio.
Thank you very much. I also wanted to add our thanks from IOE to the participants, and notably to the Honorable Minister of Agriculture of Ethiopia. Thank you for having been with us during the whole event. To Mr. Donald Brown, as a representative of senior management of IFAD, and of course to the other colleagues, country directors for India and for Ethiopia, and to the colleagues in the evaluation office of IOE. We have in front of us, I think, a very exciting evaluation synthesis on government performance, which will be conducted next year. And drawing from what we heard today, I can say two things. First of all, it's very exciting, but we will need to unpack really the notion of government performance. And unpack it because first identifying which agency are we talking about performance. Are we talking about ministries? Are we talking about their agency? Are we talking about program management units? Second, which function of the government? Well, are we looking at policy setting, policy making? Are we looking at operational level program implementation? And then level of the government, because we alluded to this today. We have central level, we've got local level, and also middle range level of governments to look at. And the evaluation synthesis will be based on a number of project and country program evaluation, where the government performance is standard criteria. So I hope there will be enough variance and in a way coverage of a different evaluation of all this aspect. The second point, which I struck also my attention, is that government performance cannot be seen as an exogenous factor, and for at least 3 reasons, which the speakers today have explained to us very well. One, many of you have insisted on the fact that at the design level, it's very important to conduct an analysis of the political economy and the context of the capacity of organization. So that's something which needs to be looked at the design, what we want to expect from the government performance. Second, the program and the project themselves can include elements that enhance the capacity of the government, and incentives also. That was a very interesting point that made on the Q&A, written Q&A by our colleague Francisco Pichon about the incentives that exist in certain countries, which he found very instrumental to improve government performance. And third, the importance, and this was the Honorable Minister from Ethiopia also reinforced this point in how important IFAD can be also in fostering government performance. So it's part of the role of IFAD. These are just a few facts that popped up in my mind, and I wish really to thank again to all the participants, which were more than 70, the panelists, and also Roxy. Special thanks to you for being a very good moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabrizio, and thank you very much to all of you. I want to also thank all of the IOE colleagues, because a lot of work has gone to make this event possible. There were a lot of people behind the scenes who have been working hard to make sure that the technology works, and that those of us who were not too familiar with the technology actually learned the technology. So thank you very much, everybody. And I wish you a wonderful evening, and most importantly, keep safe and be in good health. Thank you.